May 13, 1943, as the Afrika Korps surrendered, a young German mechanic shipped to America was sure Roosevelt's 5,000 Shermans was a bluff. Weeks later, he's watching a mile-long freight of brand-new tanks thunder past his POW camp, while a Coca-Cola truck idles by the gate. How did a nation rationing butter build 80,000 tanks, and why did Germany never see it coming? June 1943. Franz, a German tank mechanic, stood on the deck of a gray ship as it slid into a broad American river. Greece and Africa's sand still sat in his boots. He told himself that Roosevelt's talk of 5,000 Shermans was a joke. Their papers had laughed. Germany had craft. America had noise. He waited for the noise to fade. It did not. The dock boomed with cranes. Forklifts beeped. A soldier with MP on his band called out times to the minute. Trucks coughed smoke that smelled of oil and syrup. Franz breathed it in and tasted metal. They sent him by rail to a camp in the Midwest. The ride took 2 nights. He counted bridges. He saw yards full of timber, ore, and tires. In morning light, the cornfields looked like seas. The camp had a 10-foot fence and 3 rows of barbed wire. The gatehouse kept a clock to the second. A sign listed rules from the Geneva Convention. A second sign showed canteen prices for coffee, Coca-Cola, and soap. Inside the barracks, bunks stood 12 inches apart, in a row. Sheets were stiff. The mess hall smelled of coffee all day. On the wall, a board showed baseball scores and a chart of tank totals. Franz stared. He told himself it was a bluff. He said it again at night. The guards were steady but fair. Lieutenant Harris checked watches and kept a neat log. He read from a War Production Board poster about saving time, parts, and motion. Local sheriff stopped by. The town sent old books. Franz folded his arms, quietly. Work crews went to farms and plants. Mrs. Callahan met the first crew at her gate with a tin of cornbread. She was brisk, a pencil behind her ear. "We start at 8, she said. 20 minutes for lunch. The field smelled of earth. At the store, shelves were not bare. People showed ration coupons and still smiled. A boy waved a faded glove and asked about baseball. Franz shook his head no. At a machine shop, Eddie the foreman walked them past rows of jigs and gauges set to single marks. He said the line ran day and night. Women in blue coveralls swapped shifts at midnight. Detroit once made cars. Now it made turrets. Rails fed steel by the mile. Parts fit because they were the same each time. Ships sent aid to allies, while plants never slept. One afternoon, the ground began to tremble. A long freight came around the bend, flat car after flat car, a full mile by Franz's count. Fresh olive paint, white stars, and the short, blunt guns of new tanks. Men on the road did not stare. They only checked their watches and moved. A Coca-Cola truck idled by the camp gate, while the train thundered past. Someone laughed about Roosevelt's number. Franz felt the cornbread in his pocket grow heavy, and, for the first time, he did not trust the jokes. Morning began with a clang of pans. The mess hall doors swung open, and cold air rushed from a metal door marked freezer. Inside, Franz saw meat in paper, milk on racks, and trays of eggs. Dozens on each shelf. A cook laughed and said, "Watch your step, ice is slick." White bread rose in soft, warm stacks. At the end of the line, a man dipped a steel scoop and set a hill of ice cream on Franz's tray. Outside, the wind was sharp, yet here they served ice cream as if summer never ended. By noon, a truck with the red Coca-Cola script rattled up to the fence. The guard lifted the bar and called, "Canteen credits only." The guard grinned and said, "Sugar is rationed, not happiness." Franz held the cold glass and watched bubbles climb. Back home, his mother saved sugar for holidays. Here, sweetness rolled up to a prison gate. On a work detail, Eddie led Franz through a small plant that fed a bigger one down the road. Jigs lay in rows with gauges set to single numbers. Torque wrenches hung on hooks at shoulder height. A clock over the door ticked half seconds. "We run 3 shifts, Eddie said. 8 hours each, no gaps. Train in 2 weeks, good to go. Women in blue coveralls swapped places at the bell. An inspector checked 90 bolts in 9 minutes, then waved the cart on. Parts came in bins with tags that matched the charts. If a piece did not fit, it went to a red table and was fixed in 3 steps. Franz felt his hands twitch to measure and file, but the line moved without him. Back at camp, Red Cross parcels came with neat ties. The library cart rolled by with old novels, handbooks, and glossy magazines. Photos showed long halls of tanks, hulls lined nose to tail under high lamps. A chart in one issue bragged of totals past old goals. On Sunday, the Guard marched a crew to the town theater. Newsreels threw black and white light on their faces. Columns of Shermans boarded ships like ants carrying leaves. A bright voice said, "Another record month." His chest felt tight, as if a belt had been pulled 1 notch smaller. Monday brought Mrs. Callahan to the gate with warm cornbread in a towel. Butter slid down the edges and left a gold stain. "Take it," she said. "You worked hard." Her boy pressed a worn glove into Franz's hands. "Catch," the boy said, and tossed a ball from 10 steps. They laughed when Franz missed, and the boy showed him how to hold the pocket and step with his left foot. That night, Franz spread a scrap card on his bunk. Dates, columns, and totals. He traced each figure with a blunt pencil. Abundance versus hunger. Speed versus craft. He folded the card and slid it into his pocket. He lay awake and listened for another long train. He hoped it would stop. He knew it would not. Thanksgiving came with cold air and bright Sunday. The mess hall smelled of butter and coffee. A chaplain stood by the door and said, "All men need mercy." Steam rose from a 20-pound turkey on a steel pan. Knives clicked. Gravy ran like paint. Franz held his tray tight. He told himself this was for show. He said it twice. Then a cook set a thick slice on his plate, measured mashed potatoes with 1 flat scoop, and added a square of pumpkin pie with a clean-cut edge. At the end, the scoop of ice cream sat on the pie and held its shape. He sat near the window. Outside, the flag pulled hard in the wind. Boots rang on the walk in steady beats, 1 every second. The chaplain bowed his head. "Eat and remember the living," he said. Franz looked at the men around him. No one rushed. No one fought for more. When a fork fell, a guard picked it up and said, "Here you are," as if they were guests. That night he wrote by dim bulb light. "They eat ice cream while at war," he wrote. "What else are they able to do?" He drew a small box and wrote 3 words inside it: time, parts, motion. He stared until the words felt warm. 2 days later, Eddie walked him back to the turret ring station. A clock on the wall ticked off seconds. A chime rang every 5 minutes. With each chime, a hull moved 1 space forward. A woman checked 8 bolts with 1 tool. Click, 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 the same pressure each time. A tag showed torque in inch-pounds. Bins stood at elbow height, labels toward the hand. "We do not chase perfect," Eddie said. "We chase enough, on time." Franz whispered the line so he would not lose it. Back at camp, the newspaper listed totals in bold type. The number for last month alone was larger than the old goal. A visiting teacher spoke in the rec room and drew lines on a chalkboard. 1 for build, 1 for ship, 1 for replace. "Standard parts," he said. "Standard training. The plan lives after the man." Franz felt a hard lump in his chest. It was pride, but it was not for home. He walked to the shed and found the old generator. He cleaned the plugs, set a small tray for nuts and washers, and made a checklist in pencil with 6 steps. He put the wrench back in the same place each time. The engine turned on the first pull. The guard smiled. "Good system," he said. Franz nodded and looked at the light. It was plain, and it worked. He wrote again before sleep. "We laughed at 5,000, he wrote. "Here, numbers are shifts. Power is not a roar. Power is the next crate that arrives when it should." He set the pencil down and listened for the night train, and he knew it would come. Autumn 1946. The train set Franz down in a town smaller than his memory. Walls were open to the sky. The air smelled of coal dust and wet stone. A woman cut bread into thin slices, 1 finger wide, for a quiet line that curled past the church steps. No engines thrummed here. Only boots on grit and a bike chain ticking each turn. Franz carried a small bag to the lot where his house had stood and touched a brick. The stone felt cold even in sun, as if the night had stayed and would not leave yet today. He had brought little: a folded baseball glove, a slim notebook of sketches, bins, arrows, and 6 steps for a job, a card with inch marks and torque, a cornbread recipe on the back of a canteen slip written in a neat hand. In his head he kept a rhythm: time, parts, motion. His sister met him by the church wall with 2 cups of weak tea. "We will start again," she said. He nodded and watched a pale sun slow behind smoke and break into gray strips across the street, like rails laid in the sky. They walked home. A week later, he found work in a shed by the rail yard. The shop owned 3 lathes. 2 were out of true and 1 had a cracked belt. Oil smelled sharp. The owner, a man with rough hands, said, "We do what we can." Franz hung a nail board and wrote 6 steps for each task. He set a tray for nuts, a tray for bolts, and a can for scrap. He labeled drawers in chalk and drew a box for each wrench. Fridays at 4, he stopped the floor 20 minutes to clean, check belts, and oil bearings. At night, he taught his niece and nephew words at the table: wrench, schedule, glove. He told them about a hall where food was hot and lines were fair. He told them about a day when even foes ate pie. He did not praise the war, he praised dignity. On Sundays, he took the children to the field and opened the glove. At 30 feet, he tossed the ball and said, "Step with your left." Laughter rose like small bells and filled gaps in walls. They passed the shed, and he pointed at labels and lists taped at each bench. Change spread. A supplier agreed to bring bar stock each Tuesday. Franz wrote 1 page and pinned it. Buy, cut, turn, ship. Years turned. Rail cars came on time. A plant opened 2 stations down. Its manager read Franz's lists and copied them in ink. Wages rose. When ice returned to the market, he bought a scoop for 2 bowls after supper. That night he wrote a line: "We laughed at 5,000. They built past 80,000. Power is not a shout, but a promise that the next crate arrives when it should, and hands ready to lift it."